Kale stirred, feeling the stiffness in his body before he opened his eyes. The darkness around him pulsed with a soft, eerie glow, illuminating tendrils of strange vines that crept along the ceiling like veins. His head ached, the sharp kind of ache that felt like it was deep within his skull, a reminder of his crash. Slowly, he became aware of the smooth, cool surface beneath him, something between stone and metal, and the quiet murmurs of a language he didn't recognize. When he turned his head, he saw her. The alien woman moved with an unnatural grace, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders, catching and reflecting the light in an almost ethereal way. Her skin had a faint, soft blue tint, barely noticeable but enough to make her look otherworldly. She was watching him, her eyes large and luminescent, with flecks of gold that seemed to swim within them. Where am I?" His voice came out hoarse. The alien woman tilted her head slightly, a gentle smile forming on her lips as she responded in a melodic, unfamiliar tongue. He shook his head, and she paused, then shifted her tone as if searching for words he'd understand. "You are safe," she said slowly, each word careful as if testing it. "You fell from the stars. Hurt. I brought you here." Kyle tried to sit up, wincing as a sharp pain shot through his side. He reached up, finding a bandage wrapped tightly around his torso. Memories began flooding back, his spacecraft, the malfunction, the fiery descent. "Thank you, I think." He forced a small smile, though his instincts urged caution. "What is your name?" "Saren," she replied, watching him closely. "Saren." He tested her name on his tongue, feeling the shape of it. "My name is Kale." She repeated his name, the syllables rolling softly from her lips, as if the sound of it was new to her. "Kale," she said with a quiet satisfaction, "you should rest. Injuries are deep." Kale shifted uncomfortably, glancing around. The room was both unfamiliar and strangely soothing, filled with soft, warm light from bioluminescent plants lining the walls. But there was something unsettling too, a sensation he couldn't quite place, a subtle wrongness that kept his nerves on edge. "Where is this place?" he asked. "Your home?" She nodded, her expression serene, and placed a hand on his shoulder to guide him back down. "Rest is good for you." A reluctant sigh escaped him as he allowed himself to lie back. He didn't fully trust her, but he was in no position to argue. He studied her face, her eyes, trying to read something beneath the calm exterior. "Saren, I appreciate your help, but I can't stay here. I have to get back to my ship, or at least try to find it. Maybe there's a way off this planet." At his words, her serene expression faltered, but only briefly, like a ripple on a calm lake. She quickly regained her composure, her voice soft but firm. "Your ship is broken, beyond repair. It is no longer a concern." Kyle felt his stomach tighten. "But you can help me get off this planet, right? Maybe you have a way?" Saren hesitated, looking at him with a pitying gaze that made him bristle. "It is better for you here, Kale. Safer. Our world, not as yours." "I'm not afraid of danger," he countered, trying to sit up again. The room swayed, and Saren steadied him, her touch gentle, but with an unmistakable firmness that told him resistance was pointless. "If you can just show me the way back, I'll be fine." She sighed softly, as if tired of explaining, and withdrew her hand, folding it neatly over her other. "You are not to leave." Her words hung in the air, cold and final, and Kale felt a prickle of dread crawl up his spine. "Not to leave?" "Your world is not my world," she replied, each word slow, deliberate. "But you are here now. This is where you belong." "Belong?" Kale's confusion gave way to a simmering anger. "I didn't choose to be here. I appreciate what you've done for me, Saren, but I don't belong here. I belong out there, my crew, my mission. They'll be looking for me." She looked down, as if his words pained her, but when she looked back up, her face was steeled with resolve. Your crew will not find you here. They do not reach this place. He felt the weight of her words, a sinking realization settling into his gut. What do you mean they can't reach this place? There are rules, she said softly, her gaze piercing him with an intensity that belied her gentle tone. Ancient, old laws that protect us, that protect our kind. Cale's pulse quickened as the pieces began to fall into place. You're telling me you can't let me leave because of laws? You brought me here to help me, but now you're saying I'm trapped? Saren's expression softened once more, and she reached out as if to comfort him. It is for your safety, for ours. I am bound by duty. It is my burden, as much as it is yours. He pulled away from her touch, eyes narrowing. So that's it? I'm just supposed to accept that you're keeping me here like some prisoner? Her voice grew quiet, almost mournful. Not prisoner. Protected. Kyle took a steadying breath, forcing himself to keep calm. Protected from what? But she only looked at him, her gaze unyielding, silent in a way that spoke volumes. It was a look that told him there would be no answers, that the only truth he would find here was one he would have to uncover himself. Well, he muttered, his voice thick with frustration. I don't plan on sticking around just because you say so. In response, she lowered her eyes, a hint of sadness flitting across her features. I understand, but my duty, it does not change. She stood, moving toward the doorway in one fluid motion. Rest, Kyle. You will need strength for the days ahead. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Cale in the low, pulsing glow of the room. He lay there, staring at the spot where she had stood, anger and confusion churning within him. What had he gotten himself into? Cale's mind raced as he lay in the dim, pulsating glow of his confinement. Saren's strange, almost sorrowful expression as she left him lingered in his thoughts. He had known kindness in her care, but now that kindness felt like a gilded cage. Trapped, protected, according to her. But from what exactly? After what felt like hours, the faint hum of the door opening snapped him back to the present. Saren re-entered, carrying a small bowl filled with a thick teal liquid that emitted a warm, herbal fragrance. She crossed the room silently, kneeling beside him with a serene expression. Drink, she said gently, holding the bowl out. It will ease the pain. He hesitated, eyeing the liquid with suspicion. I'm not drinking anything until you start explaining some things, Saren. She sighed, setting the bowl on a low table beside him, and regarded him with the same pitying look that had frustrated him earlier. Cale, questions will not bring you peace. The answers you seek are not mine to give. He frowned, sitting up despite the ache in his side. So you can't let me leave, you can't tell me why, and I'm supposed to just accept that? A flicker of pain crossed her face. I understand your frustration, she said softly, though her voice held an edge Cale hadn't noticed before. But there are forces beyond my control. I was tasked with ensuring your well-being, but not at the cost of certain rules. Rules? What kind of rules keep someone captive against their will? Kyle leaned forward, his voice rising. What am I to you, Saren? Some kind of experiment? A prisoner? No, Cale, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. You are a guest in a way. A guest? He couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped him. A guest who isn't allowed to leave? Saren looked down, her hands clenched in her lap, and Cale noticed, perhaps for the first time, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped each other with a faint tremble. She wasn't as composed as she appeared. You came to our world unbidden, she began, choosing her words carefully. To us you are a visitor, and visitors they are rarely permitted to go once they arrive. Rarely, he shot back. So there's still a way then? A way out? Her gaze turned hard. In theory, yes, but it is not as simple as you may think. Then make it simple, Saren, he pressed, desperation edging into his voice. I have people back home who need to know I'm alive. Friends, family. They'll be looking for me. She looked away, her face a mixture of sorrow and something darker, something almost like guilt. Your world is so different from ours, Kale. We are bound by traditions that protect us. The universe is vast and unkind, and we have survived by following rules that have stood for eons. I cannot ignore them, even if what? Kale urged, trying to catch her eye. Saren's voice was barely above a whisper. Even if I wanted to. There it was, the glimmer of compassion he'd sensed from her, buried under layers of duty and obligation. Saren, he said gently, his tone shifting, I'm not asking you to break your laws. Not yet, at least. Just help me understand. You owe me that much. She remained silent, her gaze distant, but he could see the faint tremble of conflict within her. Finally, she spoke, her voice flat. Our people, the Kirala, live by ancient laws that have protected us from outsiders for countless generations. We are bound to keep the sanctity of our world pure, and that means keeping it closed to those who do not belong here. But I didn't come here on purpose, he argued. I didn't mean to crash on your planet. To the laws, your intentions do not matter. It is simply that you are here. She paused, the sorrow creeping back into her voice. You are the first visitor in centuries, Kyle. My people have long since cut ties with the worlds beyond. You are not only dangerous to us, but you are dangerous to yourself here. Kyle struggled to process her words. Dangerous? How am I dangerous? She held his gaze, her eyes holding a deep sadness. There are things in our world that you cannot understand, things that have been kept hidden from outsiders for a reason. You think of escape, of returning to your world, but if you were to leave, if others found their way here through you. She shook her head. It would be the end of all that we have fought to protect. Her words hung heavy in the air, a web of mystery and foreboding, thick enough to choke on. So, you're saying I have to stay to protect your people's secrecy? It is not just secrecy, Kale, it is survival. Kale's frustration surged again, a restless fire igniting in his chest. You can't keep me here forever. This isn't fair. Saren's expression grew colder, as if she'd expected his reaction. What is fair does not matter here, Kale. The laws, they are unbreakable. My people's safety is my purpose. I cannot defy them. Her words grated against him, and he let out a bitter sigh. Then I guess I'll have to find my own way out. In that moment, a dangerous light flickered in Saren's eyes, an edge that hadn't been there before. Kyle, she warned, her voice as cold as the room around them. Do not mistake my kindness for weakness. If you try to leave, there will be consequences. Her tone sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't the same gentle caretaker who had tended to his wounds, who had spoken to him with compassion. No, this was a woman bound by a fierce duty, a relentless force he hadn't seen until now. So, that's it? He asked quietly, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. I'm your prisoner, and you're my jailer? For a moment, Saren's mask faltered, revealing the slightest hint of regret. It is more complicated than that. What does that mean? But she didn't answer. She merely rose from her seat, and before he could protest, she turned and left the room, the door sealing shut with a final ominous hiss. Kyle sat alone in the dim room, frustration and a faint hint of fear churning within him. He glanced around, taking in the small details of his surroundings, searching for any weakness, any clue to escape. His gaze landed on the walls, where the bioluminescent plants pulsed gently, filling the room with their otherworldly glow. He stood, approaching the door, and felt along its edges. It was sealed tight, and when he pushed against it, it held firm. The walls, smooth and cold, offered no escape either. He sank back onto the cot, feeling the weight of his confinement settle on him like a shroud. Hours passed, or so it felt. The quiet pulse of the plants was his only companion, until, finally, the door opened once more. This time, it wasn't Saren who entered, but a tall, slender alien man with pale skin and piercing dark eyes. He wore the same flowing, iridescent robes as Siren, but his presence was colder, more severe. "Kale," he greeted, his voice low and calculated. Kale straightened, eyeing him warily. "Who are you?" "I am called Varen," the man replied with a bow of his head. "Saren has asked me to speak with you." "Speak with me?" Kyle repeated, suspicion threading through his voice. "Or to keep an eye on me?" A thin smile tugged at Varine's lips. "Perhaps a bit of both. You are, after all, a guest of our people, and as such, it is my duty to ensure you understand your situation." Kyle clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. "I understand just fine. I'm being held here against my will, and I want out." Varen's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You misunderstand, Earthling. This is not a punishment. It is, as Saren may have told you, a necessity." Kale met his gaze defiantly. "You can't keep me here forever." "Forever?" Varen chuckled softly, a cold, eerie sound. "No, not forever. Only until you understand." "Understand what?" Varen leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Understand why you were brought here, and why you must never leave." Kale held his gaze, feeling the unspoken threat lurking behind those words. Whatever the truth was, it was buried beneath layers of tradition, duty, and something darker, something that would not be easily unraveled. But as Varen's cold gaze lingered on him, Kale made a silent vow he would find the answers they were hiding, no matter the cost. Kale sat in the quiet dimness of the chamber, tracing the pattern of vines growing along the walls with his eyes, his mind grappling with the tangled web of half-truths and veiled warnings Varen had left behind. The alien's words haunted him. "Only until you understand." Understand what? His hands clenched into fists as the question looped in his mind. The door slid open without warning, breaking his thoughts, and in walked Siren, her face an unreadable mask. For a long moment, she just stood there, watching him. Then, she spoke, her voice tinged with a weary resolve. "We need to talk, Kale." "Talk?" he said bitterly. "You've done enough talking without saying anything real. Maybe this time, you can just tell me the truth." A shadow passed over her face, and she let out a sigh, crossing the room to sit across from him. "If I tell you," she murmured, "then you must make a choice. But once you choose, there's no turning back." Kyle leaned forward, his gaze fierce. "I've already made up my mind. I'm getting out of here, Saren, whether you help me or not." Her expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made his stomach twist. "Then listen closely. The truth is not something you will want to hear." She paused, her fingers tracing a symbol carved into the surface of the low table between them. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost fragile. "You're here because you've been chosen, Kale, by our council, by our elders, and in part," she hesitated as if the words themselves hurt to say, "by me." He blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "Chosen? For what?" "For a role that was foretold many cycles ago," she replied. "An outsider would arrive, one whose presence would test the limits of our people's laws, challenge our ways, and force us to make a decision that could change the future of our world." Kale shook his head. "I'm just a pilot who got stranded here. I didn't come here to fulfill anyone's prophecy." Saren met his gaze, a fierce determination in her eyes. "But it's not just a prophecy. Your arrival signals the beginning of a shift we have feared for eons. A choice that must be made, and you are the catalyst for it." He searched her face, frustration mingling with a dawning realization. "So, all of this, The confinement, the secrecy, Varen's cryptic warnings, it's all some sort of trial? Saren nodded slowly. Yes. A test, but not of you alone. For us as well. To see if our people can withstand the disruption you bring. To see if we are strong enough to protect our way of life, even at the cost of compassion. Protect your way of life? Kyle's voice rose, anger flaring within him. By keeping me prisoner? By forcing me to stay here, with no answers, no way out? You don't understand, she murmured, her voice filled with an emotion he couldn't place. You weren't meant to survive the crash. Our laws forbid any outsider from leaving once they come here. And yet, when I found you... She stopped, looking away, her hands trembling. When you found me, what? He pressed. When I found you, she continued, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't bring myself to do what was required. Instead, I healed you. I told myself I could keep you here, follow the rules, and you would remain safe. But every day that you live, every day that I keep you alive... She trailed off, her voice cracking. I'm breaking the very laws I swore to uphold. The weight of her words crashed over him, and he struggled to process the implications. Then why did you save me? He asked, his tone softer, almost pleading. Saren closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. Because I saw something in you, Kyle. A resilience, a spark that reminded me of what we once were, before our world closed in on itself, before we became prisoners of our own laws. He stared at her, caught between anger and a flicker of understanding. So, what happens now? She opened her eyes, and he was struck by the raw emotion in her gaze. Now you have a choice. I can either help you leave, and in doing so, doom myself to exile, or you stay, and accept that your life here, though limited, will be spared. Kyle felt the gravity of her words settle over him, the weight of a decision he'd never thought he'd have to make. Leave, and she would pay the price. Stay, and he'd forever be a captive on an alien world. His voice was barely audible. Why would you risk everything just to save me? A faint smile touched her lips, a warmth he hadn't seen before. Because I've come to care for you, Kale. You're not just a test or a prophecy to me. You're more than that. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words, and Kale could feel his heart pounding as he weighed his options. To leave would be to break her heart, perhaps even endanger her life. But to stay. He met her gaze, his decision forming even as he struggled with it. I can't let you throw your life away for me, Saren. Not if it means exile. Her expression was pained, yet resolute. Then I must show you something. Come with me. She took his hand, leading him through a maze of corridors he'd never seen before. They moved in silence, her grip firm but trembling, until they reached a massive hall lined with statues of her people, each figure staring out with eyes that seemed to watch him with judgment. Saren turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. This is the Hall of the Venerated, the place where the souls of our ancestors dwell. Each one represents a life dedicated to preserving our world's sanctity. Kale nodded, feeling the weight of their gaze. And I'm here because... She stepped closer, looking up at him with an intensity that stole his breath. Because I want you to understand, this place, this hall, it's a reminder of what we're bound to protect, but also what we might lose if we don't adapt. If I release you, Kale, it will change everything. But maybe that's what we need. He swallowed hard, feeling the pull of her words, the weight of her sacrifice. Saren, I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. She smiled softly, reaching up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his skin. Sometimes, change requires a sacrifice, and if it means that I can show my people a different way, a way where compassion matters more than fear, then it's a price I'm willing to pay." They stood in silence, and he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him, mingling with the grief he knew would follow. She turned to the door, pressing a hidden panel that opened an unseen passageway. "This will take you to the surface," she said, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Beyond the mountains there's a transport beacon. It will call your people to you." He looked at her, his chest tightening. "You don't have to do this, Saren." She gave him a sad smile. "Yes, I do. And maybe, one day, my people will forgive me." As he stepped toward the passage, he felt her hand slip away from his, and he turned back, capturing her gaze one last time. "I'll never forget you, Saren. And you." Her voice was soft, filled with a tenderness that cut through his heart. He turned, his feet heavy as he walked down the passage, each step taking him further from the only soul on this planet who had shown him kindness, understanding. The walls seemed to close in around him, the silence pressing down until he emerged into the pale light of the surface. Behind him, the door slid shut, sealing off the world he'd leave behind. As he approached the beacon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd left a piece of himself in that hall, alongside her. He raised his hand to the device, and as the hum of the transport began, he glanced back one last time, knowing he'd never see her again. Months later, as Kyle sat in his study back on Earth, he found himself haunted by the memory of her touch, her words, her quiet strength. He never told anyone about the choice she'd made, the sacrifice she'd offered, or the love that had sparked between them, brief and forbidden as it was. In the end, he realized, he'd returned to Earth forever changed, carrying with him the secrets of a world that had nearly consumed him, and the memory of a woman who had been both his jailer and his savior, bound by duty yet willing to risk everything for him. He looked out into the stars, whispering her name to the silence, a part of him always waiting, always hoping, that maybe, one day, he'd see her again. The darkness had a life of its own here, curling like mist around the low, rocky outcrops that stretched toward the alien horizon. Alex Drake's hands were raw and blistered from the jagged metal cuffs biting into his wrists, his pulse thrumming in his ears as he was half-dragged, half-limped beside his captor. If he tried to slow down, a sharp tug from the cuffs jerked him forward as though reminding him that escape was a dream left light years behind. Ahead of him strode the alien woman, her shadow a streak of silver and shadows across the crimson sand. She was silent, purposeful, her steps barely stirring the dust beneath her feet, her dark, violet-toned skin gleaming under the faint starlight. Alex fought the urge to speak, to break the heavy silence settling over them, but he didn't have to. "I see you're awake, Earthling." Her voice was cool, wrapped in an accent he couldn't quite place, like a melody sung from a different world. She didn't even turn to look at him, her attention set firmly on the path ahead. "Don't get any ideas. The cuffs you're wearing are reinforced with keldonite. Only I have the key." "Oh, don't worry about that," he muttered, gritting his teeth as he stumbled over a rock. "I'm getting pretty comfortable with the idea of staying right by your side, especially since you dragged me halfway across this dust bowl." A flicker of amusement crossed her face, and she slowed her pace just slightly. "Interesting," she murmured. "Humor, even in the face of captivity. I didn't expect that from a human soldier." "Maybe we're full of surprises," he replied, glaring at her back. His mind raced, trying to piece together fragments of memory from the skirmish, the split-second decisions that had led to this grim walk under an alien sky. He'd been separated from his squad during an ambush, losing sight of them amid the blinding flashes of plasma fire. The last thing he remembered was a swift shadow dropping from above, arms like iron wrapping around him, and then darkness. She finally turned her head to look at him, one dark brow lifting as if she'd read his thoughts. "Your squad is scattered across the desert. They won't find you. Not until I let them." "And you're planning to do that when?" "That depends," she said softly, her voice turning low, almost gentle. "On how much you resist." Alex swallowed, meeting her gaze as best as he could, though he knew he was no match for her eyes, golden, slit-pupilled, glinting in the dark like molten metal. Those eyes spoke of mysteries far deeper than anything he'd seen in the scattered records of her species. The Sarai, he remembered now. Warriors bred from ancient, battle-hardened lines, rumored to be unstoppable, unrelenting. And standing before him was one of their finest, a soldier who'd likely single-handedly taken out a squad of Earth's best-trained soldiers. "What do you want with me?" he asked finally, and she tilted her head, considering him. "It's not what I want," she replied, her gaze narrowing. "It's what my people need." "Sounds vague," he muttered, "and suspicious." At that, she let out a quiet laugh, the sound as sharp as her gaze. "Perhaps to you. I can see you're used to getting answers handed to you, but this is a different world, human. Here, answers must be earned." "Is that a challenge?" Alex shot back, feeling a spark of defiance beneath the layers of fatigue and pain. "More of a trial," she corrected, her eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. "You might survive it, though I wouldn't bet on it if I were you." Their exchange was cut short as they reached the edge of a steep cliff, overlooking a vast desert landscape that stretched on for miles, broken only by darkened hills and strange, twisted rock formations. She paused, gazing out at the horizon, and Alex noticed a subtle shift in her stance, as if something in the distance had captured her full attention. A quiet, reverent awe settled over her, and for a moment she seemed almost vulnerable. "What do you see?" he asked, a note of curiosity slipping into his tone. "Something important?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon, her voice dropping to a murmur. "This land was once fertile, a paradise before the wars. Now it lies empty, drained of life." Her words held a strange sorrow, one that seemed to ripple through the night air, lingering in the shadows around them. "But we survive, as we always have." She turned back to him, her expression hardening again, the moment of softness gone as quickly as it had come. "And that is why you're here. Your presence is a necessity, a matter of survival." "Survival?" Alex scoffed, though his heart pounded at the urgency in her tone. "You think dragging a random human soldier halfway across a desert is going to help your people survive?" "Not just any human soldier." Her gaze bored into him with a strange, almost predatory intensity. "You, specifically. Our records spoke of an outsider, a warrior from the stars, who would bring strength to our bloodline and fortify our future." "Look, lady, I'm as human as it gets," Alex replied, exasperation bleeding into his tone. "Just a guy trying to make it out of here alive. If you're looking for some legendary warrior, you've got the wrong prisoner." "Is that what you think?" She tilted her head, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You think this is all chance? That I stumbled upon you by mistake?" He felt his pulse quicken, a chill creeping down his spine. There was a certainty in her voice that made his protests die on his lips, leaving only questions in their place. She leaned closer, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver through him. "Our seers knew of you, Alex Drake. They saw your face in their visions long before you set foot on our land. They saw the warrior who would stand at my side." She let the silence stretch, as though savoring the tension that hung between them. "The question now," she continued, "is whether you'll fulfill that role or resist it, to your own peril." Alex swallowed, unable to look away from her. "And if I refuse?" Her smile widened, the barest hint of something softer glimmering in her eyes before she turned away. "Then you'll learn soon enough that fate has its own way of convincing the reluctant." She turned and began walking again, her steps echoing across the open desert, and he had no choice but to follow. His mind raced, caught between the hazy threads of a prophecy he couldn't believe and the palpable danger radiating from his captor. But as they descended deeper into the darkness, he couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that perhaps, against all reason, there was some truth to her words. They trekked through the alien desert, under a sky that shimmered with stars and colors he had never seen. Swirling shades of blue and purple, specks of molten gold set against vast shadows. Alex found his steps growing steadier, his senses sharpening as the night's chill seeped through him, giving his mind clarity and purpose. His captor's silence gnawed at him, making him almost crave her voice, as though needing it to break the alien spell cast upon the world around him. He wrestled with his disbelief, his mind caught between the pull of her words and the stubborn resistance he clung to. "So, is this part of the trial you mentioned?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the open air. "Dragging me through miles of rock and sand?" Zadra looked over her shoulder, a smirk playing at her lips. "Impatient, are we?" "Not impatient, just curious." He kept his voice steady, resisting the urge to show the frustration gnawing at him. "This whole prophecy thing, can't say I've ever had much faith in seers and visions, not exactly in my job description." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully, her gaze scrutinizing him with that same unsettling intensity. "And yet here you are," she said softly. "Drawn across the stars, brought to our world, to me. You can deny it all you want, Earthling, but fate rarely bows to disbelief." "Is that what you tell yourself?" he shot back, unable to resist. "That you're the puppet of some prophecy? I thought warriors like you didn't believe in being controlled by anything." Her eyes flashed, and for a brief moment he thought he'd overstepped. But she held her ground, lifting her chin defiantly. "I am no puppet, human. I made my choice the day I took up the armor and the sword. I chose to fight for my people, to carry the burden of our past and future." Her voice softened, her gaze distant. "But some paths are meant to intertwine, whether we like it or not." Her words lingered, filling the empty spaces around them, and Alex found himself strangely moved. For the first time, he glimpsed something beneath the warrior's harsh exterior, a flicker of vulnerability that she hid well, yet couldn't fully conceal. He wanted to press her further, to understand why she clung to this belief in prophecy. But before he could speak, she turned and resumed her march, her steps firm, as if willing herself to bury whatever momentary weakness had slipped through. He hurried to catch up, his mind spinning with questions that collided with the harsh reality of his situation. "All right, so let's say this prophecy thing is real. What exactly am I supposed to do? Save your people? Fight in some glorious battle?" A hint of irritation flickered across her face. "It's not as simple as that, Alex Drake." Her voice held a strange gentleness when she spoke his name, as though it were an invocation of something significant. "Our future, our survival. It's not just about fighting, it's about connection, a bond that surpasses time and bloodlines." "Bond?" He narrowed his eyes, suspicion threading through his voice. "What exactly are you implying?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the sand before meeting his again, a rare uncertainty in her eyes. "A joining human, an ancient rite that binds two souls, a merging of strength, spirit, and purpose." He stared at her, dumbfounded, and for a moment words failed him. You're telling me you brought me here to join with me?" "Brought?" Her laugh was soft, almost bitter. "Do not think yourself so important, Earthling. I captured you, I bound you, and I would have killed you if the seers hadn't foretold otherwise." She shook her head, as if frustrated by his lack of understanding. "This is not a romantic fairy tale. We do this because it is required, because our people demand it." "Look, I'm not trying to downplay your beliefs," he replied carefully, his voice steadier now. "But this whole binding thing doesn't exactly sound like standard military protocol." Her gaze darkened, and she took a step closer, so close that he could feel the heat of her body against the cold desert air. "You are not here because of your protocol, Earthling. You are here because your very existence defies it, because despite your stubborn disbelief, You are the one the prophecy speaks of." They stood inches apart, his pulse hammering as her words pressed against him, wrapping around him like a vice he couldn't break free from. He tried to hold her gaze, to resist the strange pull that seemed to radiate from her, but he found himself captivated, drawn into the depths of those golden eyes that held secrets as old as the stars themselves. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, as if the question itself were too fragile to be spoken aloud. Zadra's gaze softened, a glimmer of sadness flickering in her eyes. "Because the fates have a sense of irony, human. Because you, of all people, carry the strength and the spirit that my people need. Because as much as you may resist, you are meant to stand by my side." They fell silent, the weight of her words settling between them, thickening the air with an intensity that defied logic, and Alex found himself drawn to her, not out of fear or duty, but out of a curiosity, a need to understand the strange, fragile bond that seemed to tether them together. Before he could speak, a sharp, piercing cry echoed across the desert, shattering the silence. Zadra's head snapped up, her body tensing as she scanned the horizon, her eyes narrowing. "They've found us." "Who?" Alex asked, his voice low, his instincts sharpening. She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the darkened hills in the distance. "Our enemies. The ones who would see our people destroyed, prophecy or no prophecy." He felt a chill run down his spine as she unfastened a blade from her side, its edge glinting in the faint starlight. "Stay close, human, and do exactly as I say." He opened his mouth to protest, to insist that he didn't need protection, but she silenced him with a fierce glare, her expression brooking no argument. "You may be a soldier, but you are no match for them. This is my world, my fight." Without another word, she pressed him against the cliffside, shielding him with her body as the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer, until he could make out dark shapes moving across the sands. A group of alien warriors, their silhouettes sharp and menacing, their weapons gleaming under the stars. Zadra tensed, her grip on her blade tightening, and for a brief moment, Alex glimpsed the fire in her eyes, a fierce, unyielding determination that sent a thrill through him despite the danger that loomed. "Stay hidden," she whispered, her voice a mere breath against his ear. "I will deal with them." Before he could respond, she launched herself forward, a blur of motion as she collided with the nearest warrior, her blade flashing in a deadly arc. The enemy barely had time to react before he fell, his weapon clattering to the ground as Zadra moved like a storm, her strike swift, precise, and devastating. Alex watched, his breath caught in his throat as she fought with a ferocity he'd never seen. A dance of lethal grace and power that left her enemies reeling. But even as he marveled at her skill, a deep unease settled within him. He knew that this fight, this prophecy, whatever strange destiny bound them together, it was only the beginning. The last enemy fell with a strangled gasp, and Zadra turned back to him, her gaze fierce yet softened by an unspoken understanding. "Now you see," she murmured, wiping the blood from her blade. "This is the life I've chosen, the path I walk. And you, Alex Drake, are a part of it, whether you like it or not." He stared at her, his resolve crumbling as he searched her face for answers. And in that moment, he knew that, no matter how much he resisted, he couldn't deny the pull between them. The bond forged in battle, prophecy, and something deeper that defied explanation. They stood together, two souls caught in the web of fate, each bound to a destiny they couldn't escape. And as the stars watched in silent witness, Alex felt the weight of her words settle within him, a promise of battles yet to come and a future as uncertain as the starlit sky above. The silence of the desert had returned, thick and unmoving. A chill wind blew across the sands, stirring faint trails of dust, and Alex found himself struggling to breathe in the cold, thin air. Zadra's figure loomed before him, still as stone, her silhouette outlined by the fading light of twin moons that hung low on the horizon. Every instinct told him to run, to abandon this alien fate that had swept him up in its current. Yet here he was, unmoving, spellbound by the intensity of her gaze. He took a tentative step forward, breaking the silence. "Zadra, if I'm truly meant to help your people, then you need to trust me. I can't be kept in the dark anymore. No more prophecies, no more riddles. Tell me why I'm really here." Her expression was unreadable, the golden light in her eyes flickering as if caught in an unseen storm. "Trust is not something I give lightly, Earthling, not when the stakes are this high." "You already know my name," he said quietly. "Why won't you use it?" She looked away, her shoulders tense as she gripped her blade. "Because names mean little here, Alex Drake. In this world, we are defined by our duty, our role in the grand design. And yet—" Her voice softened, an unfamiliar tenderness threading through her words. "Yet you have challenged that, defied it at every turn." He studied her, feeling a strange kinship tugging at him, an unspoken connection woven from shared danger, secrets, and unyielding determination. "You talk about duty, about fate, but what about choice? Isn't that what makes us more than just pawns in some ancient prophecy?" Her lips parted as though to respond, but she faltered, a shadow passing over her face. "You do not understand, Alex. This is a fate that has been foreseen for centuries, one I was sworn to uphold even before I took my first breath. I was taught that this—" She gestured to the empty desert, to the stars, to him, as if the enormity of it all could be captured in a single motion. "That this was inevitable, that your presence here is the key to everything." He shook his head, frustration sharpening his words. "But why me, Zadra? What is it about me that ties me to your people?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, her gaze a mixture of defiance and something softer, something that made his heart pound. "Because you, Alex Drake, carry the spirit of our greatest warrior, the one who was prophesied to return and unite us." For a moment, her words hung between them, and Alex felt the ground shift beneath him, as if some deeper truth were slowly surfacing, wrapping around him like an invisible thread he could neither see nor break. "That's impossible," he murmured, barely able to speak. "I'm just a soldier, a human soldier. I don't carry the spirit of anyone." "Think back," she urged, stepping closer. "Have you never felt it? A pull towards something greater, a voice that calls to you from beyond the stars? You wouldn't have come this far otherwise." Alex's mind spun, fragments of memories flitting through his thoughts, the restless nights, the dreams that had haunted him long before he set foot on this alien world, dreams of battles he'd never fought, of voices calling his name, voices that felt as old as time. But he had dismissed them, chalked them up to the stress of combat, the chaos of a soldier's life. "You knew all along," he realized, his voice barely a whisper. "You knew, and you let me believe I was just a prisoner." Zadra's expression softened, a flicker of regret in her eyes. "I had to be sure, Alex. I had to see if the prophecy was true, if you truly carried the spirit of the warrior within you. This mission, this capture, it was all to test you, to see if you would resist, fight back, or choose to walk the path willingly." He took a step back, feeling the weight of her words settle over him like a shroud. His life, his choices, all of it felt suddenly insignificant, as though he had been swept up in a story that was never his to begin with. And yet, a part of him, a part he barely understood, felt a deep, undeniable resonance with her words. "Let me ask you something, Zadra," he said, his voice stronger now, steadier. "What if I refuse? What if I choose not to play my part in your prophecy?" Her gaze hardened, but there was a trace of vulnerability in her eyes, something she couldn't quite hide. "Then you condemn us, Alex, my people, my world, everything we stand for. You carry the essence of our hope, our survival." He looked away, struggling to comprehend the gravity of her words. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't sought out this destiny, yet here it was, staring him down with the intensity of a warrior's gaze. "So what happens now?" he asked, a sense of inevitability settling over him. What does this prophecy require of me? Zadra lifted her hand, holding it out to him, her expression fierce yet tempered by a strange, quiet resolve. Take my hand, Alex Drake. Pledge yourself to our people, to me. Together we will forge a bond that will ripple through the stars, a union that will restore balance to this world. He hesitated, his gaze flickering to her outstretched hand, feeling the weight of the choice before him. This was not just a bond, not just an alliance. It was a promise, a commitment to a path that would reshape his very existence. And as he looked into her eyes, he saw the depths of her belief, the conviction that burned within her, a fire that had withstood the test of centuries. Slowly, he lifted his hand, letting it hover above hers, feeling the warmth of her skin radiating toward him. And what about us, Zadra? What happens to us? Her gaze softened, a glimmer of something unspoken passing between them. We become part of the prophecy, Alex. Together, we will be the guardians of its truth and the keepers of each other's fates. Their hands met, and a strange, exhilarating energy surged through him, a pulse that seemed to resonate from the core of his being, as though awakening something dormant, something ancient. He felt himself drawn to her, not just by duty or fate, but by a connection that defied all explanation, a bond that transcended time, space, and reason. As their hands intertwined, a sudden tremor shook the ground, a low rumble that vibrated through the desert, sending a cascade of dust and sand into the air. He glanced at Zadra, alarmed, but she only smiled, a fierce, triumphant gleam in her eyes. "It is done," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "The bond has been forged." Before he could respond, a blinding light enveloped them, searing through the night with an intensity that left him breathless. He shielded his eyes, his heart pounding as the light grew brighter, more powerful, until it seemed to consume everything around them. When the light faded, they stood in silence, the desert stretching out before them, vast and unchanged. Yet something had shifted, a subtle, unspoken understanding that pulsed between them, a sense of unity that transcended words. "You feel it, don't you?" Zadra's voice was soft, almost reverent, as she looked at him with a gaze that held both tenderness and awe. "The bond. We are one, Alex. From this moment forward, our fates are intertwined." He swallowed, feeling the weight of her words settle over him like a mantle, heavy yet strangely comforting. "I feel it," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But what now? What does this mean for us, for your people?" She took a step closer, her hand still clasped in his, her gaze unwavering. "It means that we fight, Alex. Together, we will protect our world, defend the prophecy, and carve a path toward a future that only we can shape." As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the desert, Alex felt a strange peace settle within him. He didn't know what the future held, didn't understand the full extent of the destiny that lay before him. But as he looked into Zadra's eyes, he knew one thing with unshakable certainty. Whatever battles lay ahead, whatever trials they would face them together. Two warriors bound by fate, by choice, and by a bond that would endure beyond the stars.